Great, we're going to get started today. Welcome. My name is Fatima Hawk, and I am BLI's Academic Program Manager overseeing the Capstone program in evidence-based leadership. The Capstone program aims to empower student teams to explore an issue of significance to them, collect data from stakeholders, and make evidence-informed decisions to address said issue. This year, 4 teams completed the Capstone program, and as you'll shortly see, they addressed urgent, timely issues with deep consideration and care. They tackled issues such as reducing plastic waste and protecting our planet, decreasing polarization and increasing critical thinking in the way we consume political news, providing safe, secure sanitation facilities for some of the most impoverished and at-risk individuals, and bringing light to college hidden curricula for first-generation and low-income students everywhere. Needless to say, I am left in awe of these students' awareness, dedication, and motivation to take action and affect positive change. So how did they do this work? As in past years, these teams began their work by thoroughly researching their topics, learning from published scholarships, stakeholder interviews, and surveys and focus groups. They built relationships with the people they sought to work with and serve, and listened to understand the needs of their constituents before moving into an action plan. These teams work to learn, a habit we teach at the BLI, and designed small pilots that led to great learning and better large-scale implementation. All this in the midst of an ongoing pandemic was a tall order, but the students met this with thoughtfulness that typifies the best leaders. The format of today's event will be 4 rounds of presentation and discussion, 1 for each of our capstone teams. Each team was mentored by a graduate student advisor, and these GAs, Amanda and Sarah, will moderate the discussions following each presentation. I encourage you all to take notes on content and delivery, as we will have time to share feedback and ask questions. I'd like to give special thanks to some honored guests who have taken the time to be here today to give content-specific feedback to our teams. Many thanks to Adan Hussein, Gabrielle Lerner, Shelly Shahi, and Tiffany Mara for being with us. Okay, so without further ado, let's have our first team, Ease Cosmetics.
Hi, I'm Emily. I am majoring in plant biology. I'm in my 3rd year at U of M.
Hi everyone, my name is Haley. I am majoring in public policy. I'm also in my 3rd year, and thank you all for coming. We're gonna jump right into it. Our project is called Ease Cosmetics, and we're starting a sustainable cosmetic brand aimed at simplifying your beauty routine and reducing plastic waste in the cosmetic industry.
So the reason we really started on this project can be summed up by this image and quote. The beauty industry uses tons and tons of plastics each year, and those plastics end up everywhere, from Antarctica to the Mariana Trench, and most people can't go a day without seeing at least some plastic. I know I definitely can't. My bathroom alone is filled with tons of products packaged in plastic, and the worst part is they don't go away, and when they do break down, they break down into microplastics, which can accumulate persistent bioaccumulative toxic chemicals. So that is a huge problem. And since we both love makeup, but don't want to use it at the expense of our planet, we wanted to start our own makeup brand that is sustainable.
So based on that idea for the brand, we came up with these list of brand concepts. We want to create a product that is easy to use and easy in the environment, and care about cutting down waste in the cosmetic industry. But we also want to create a product that goes along with our core audience, so high school and college girls. So not a product that prescribes to greenwashing or seems overly earthy, something still hip and cool, but is also good for the environment. And we want to begin with a multi-use tinted balm that works on your lips, cheeks, and eyes. So 1 product for all 3 places.
So to start off, we wanted to affirm some of the assumptions we had coming into this project, that there was in fact a gap in the market and our product could fill it. So we conducted a literature review, which consisted of 15 articles from the U of M library. And a couple of the main takeaways we got from it were that about 60% of women in a worldwide survey favored sustainable features in their cosmetics. Another takeaway we got was that the level at which consumers consider the environmental impact of their cosmetics when purchasing them was comparable between Western and South Asian countries. And the third thing, which was a theme that came up in lots of the articles we were reading, was the desire for clear standards and explanations on what a company means when they say they are green. So the next thing we did after the literature review to gain some more feedback on our potential customers and consumers was to create a survey on Qualtrics. And from this, we learned about color preferences for branding, colors for the balm, interest in the multi-use balm, the sustainability of the balm, and interest in a recycling program. A couple of the statistics from that survey are that 84% somewhat or strongly agree that a multi-purpose balm is more sustainable than a single-purpose balm. And about 81.66% of the participants responded that they had a moderate to extreme interest in the multi-use balm and also use makeup 2 to 3 times a week. And then this table on the side shows the main qualities that participants look for and avoid when purchasing cosmetic products.
Finally, we conducted a packaging survey in person. We collected responses on the diag from college students walking by, which worked out great for us because that's our target demographic. We were only outside for about like an hour and a half, I suppose, when we got around 41 responses, which is a pretty good turnout. And we had all survey respondents look at the 4 tubes that we were considering for our product. So 1 tube made out of bioplastic, 1 tube made out of paper, 1 tube made out of recycled plastic, and then 1 tube made out of virgin plastic. They could touch the tubes, open them, whatever they wanted, and then fill out the survey. And the bioplastic tube was ranked the highest in terms of ease of use, material design, and second highest for sustainability. So that became the clear winner to us.
After we did these 3 research, the survey and the literature review and the other survey, we analyzed the data and sat down to reflect together on what our core values were as a team and what they meant to us and how we would bring them into our project. The values we decided on was trust, transparency, simplicity, kindness, sustainability, and humility. From there, we finalized the design of our product. And so this will be the bioplastic tube with a removable inner aluminum piece. The bioplastic component will be compostable and the aluminum piece will be recyclable. And we will offer a recycling program for the packaging in case people don't have recycling or compost available at their homes. They can send it into us and we will give them a discount on future products. And then the next part that we decided on was to hand make the multi-use tinted balm that we have been working on with a chemist for the past couple of months. And the formula is based off the qualities that participants in the first survey gave.
Yeah, so we're also working on branding aesthetics wise. This is our current color palette. We're making a few tweaks here and there, but I'll go through the ideas that went behind this. So we have the 2 shades of green that stand for the sustainability components, and then the 2 pinkier shades that bring out the femininity and other that bring out like the feminine aspects of cosmetic use. And then also we have one of the fonts that we're very keen on. It's called Soap, and I love it. It just seems very fun and bubbly. We've also started working on our social media presence. We've created TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn profiles, as well as launching a website. Please go check it out, easecosmeticsofficial.com. We'll put it in the chat. And for now, we're working on building content on these platforms before launching it to the public and sharing it with our family and friends. So hopefully soon everything will be out, but our LinkedIn's open now. And so is our website. And then we have our next steps. Our project is nowhere near done, and we don't see it being done in the foreseeable future. But we do know what we want to do next, and we want to receive the final formula. We just okayed it, so it should be here soon. And then we need to order supplies based on what's in the formula so that we can make the product ourselves. We want to expand our social media presence. And I've been researching a lot into that, and we're very excited to dive deeper into that. And then finally, we want to create the products ourselves and sell the products through a pre-order system. The big picture of our project would be to create an ethical and sustainable makeup brand that is purchasable in brick and mortar retail stores. We also want to create a line of products that you feel good wearing and that you feel good about using. Thank you so much for coming here and listening to our presentation. We really appreciate your time, and non-recorded us will answer any questions that you have now.
Great job. Thank you so much, Haley and Emily, for sharing that beautiful presentation and walking us through your progress on your project so far. We look forward to seeing how it develops further along. My name is Sarah, and I'm the graduate assistant who had the pleasure of supporting the development of Ease Cosmetics. And we'd love to invite any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for that presentation. You can feel free to either unmute yourself and ask a question or drop one in the chat for the team, and they'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I've been along for the ride for quite some time, so I'm happy to also kick off with a question. As you reflect on your company values, I wonder if you think a little bit more and dig deeper, how would you reflect on where your values are right now, and what might you change or what might you add to your company values as they stand right now? Either Haley or Emily, or maybe both of you can answer this question.
So I think that after doing all the surveys and getting the feedback, I think one thing that we could maybe add to our values is just that we really appreciate the feedback from the consumers. So really relying on getting the feedback and not just our own assumptions. I think it's definitely something that we would want to include in our core values. So that would be like reflection.
I think a lot of our core values right now are based on like how we want to conduct ourselves. It'd be interesting to tie in how we want to like treat the consumer and like how we like what kind of consumer we want for our brand. So that's like a next step.
I have a quick question. This is Mary Schlitt, the Assistant Director for the BLI. Great job, everyone. I'm really excited to see the final product, and I'm really interested in the color palette. That was really neat. I hadn't heard before that green was tied to your sustainability, so that was kind of exciting, and I'd love to see that color on somebody. I had a question about the product itself. You said it was compostable, recyclable, durable. I was just curious, what parts of that tube were what? Is the aluminum the recyclable and the tube is compostable?
Yes, so it's made out of the bioplastic and the aluminum. So the aluminum is the recyclable part, and the bioplastic tube is the compostable part. And the aluminum part is removable from the bioplastic. So it comes apart, so it would be easy to recycle.
Thanks for that question, Mary. And I recognize we have a couple hands raised, so we can start with David and then move to Ram after that. Thanks for that.
Hey, great. Thanks on that, Sarah. Dave Barger, Emily Haley, thanks for the presentation. Really appreciate it. I'm thinking of the habits, and I'm curious on the 7.9 billion. Collect, combine, create. I love the numbers, by the way. The 7.9 billion, the survey, the 174 responses, and another 41 on the diag. I mean, it's truly trying to use data. And the 7.9 billion units of rigid plastic, how did you source that? I'm just curious. I didn't capture it in the presentation, but just curious in terms of how you source that information. And again, thanks for the presentation. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. So that number came from an article that was in an Alert magazine article online. So that's where that came from. Yeah.
Gotcha. Is there a need to further source that in terms of, there's so much of this in the world, you wonder, and I love the reference to the Mariana Trench. Yeah, I used to work out in that part of the world. I mean, but should you triangulate maybe a little bit in terms of what that number is? I mean, it almost seems impossible to find out what it really is. I mean, the issue is there's just too much of it. I get that. Anyway, back to you.
I think that would definitely be an area that we could spend some more time on, like trying to figure out an exact number and like get more specific on that.
Yeah, gotcha. No, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And just to briefly interject, in the interest of time, I think we'll be able to take one more question and then move to the next team, but feel free to continue the conversation with any additional questions in the chat and the team can address them there. So one more from Ram and then we'll move forward. Thanks for keeping moving. Really appreciate it.
Great. I really enjoyed the presentation. A lot of good work. I think one of the challenge, I really liked the values you put in the slide. And the challenge for any business is they all have values, but they also want to signal the values to the customers for them to understand this is the value, because that's a big challenge. I think, do you have any thoughts about how you're going to signal your values? I know you have these values, but as the consumer, I need to know you have the values and how you're going to signal that.
So on our Instagram page, we did make a post about the core values and we listed them. And then on our website, we were going to go more in depth on what those values mean to us. So if they see the post on Instagram, they can click on to the website and get more details on that, because it would be nice for them to see and for them to be able to hold us accountable to those values.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you for all of those really engaging questions. And I think we're ready to move to the next team now. And feel free to continue those conversations and questions in the chat. Amazing job, East Cosmetics. Thanks for all your hard work.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending the 2021 Capstone Virtual Showcase. My name is Jake Domagalski, and I'm a part of the Nonpolar team alongside Aaron Williams, Adam Aguilar, Siddharth Marthi, and Corey Schnack. COVID has become a topic that pervades all other factors of our lives, including politics. We've all been tuned into every regulation, metric, and update to the virus that has upended our daily lives. So let's take a look at a recent article from Newsweek covering one of the central figures of pandemic response, Dr. Anthony Fauci. This headline reads, "Fauci accuses Tucker Carlson of killing people by weaponizing lies." What's your reaction to this story? How does it make you feel? Who do you think is right? Clearly, this line of thinking is very emotionally charged, reactive, politically divisive, and deters people from digging deeper into the issues at hand. However, for the thousands of people that saw this headline and simply scrolled past it, all they saw was two sides of America that are seemingly irreconcilable. So how could we fix this? If we want constructive political discourse to come out of the news we consume, we need our citizens to understand the context of current events, how our democracy functions in order to effectively share their views, and how the current news media and technology ecosystems have accelerated the consequences of polarization and misinformation spreading throughout our society. This is what inspired all of us to create Nonpolar. We want to bring people the tools to be in the know and become a part of a broader political conversation. This brings us to our mission statement. We are a team of college students with diverse political beliefs and backgrounds dedicated to providing our community with a tool to broaden their political consumption and highlight bias in the realm of political news.
Our mission statement helped to inform our research questions, which were, what do followers of politics want out of their news consumption, and how does exposure to different viewpoints affect polarization, which allowed us to inform our next steps of research. First, we conducted literature reviews. Some key findings were that exposing people to opposing viewpoints makes them more polarized. And within the complicated relationship between media, technology, and politics, we had challenges when encountering paradoxical and contradictory information, and it became difficult to sort through. When we also conducted stakeholder interviews. Specifically, we talked to Jeremy Garson from Bridge Alliance, a coalition of organizations dedicated to working to bridge the political divide through various means. Mayor Chris Taylor from Ann Arbor, Professor Valentino, a UMich professor from the Poli-Sci department, and two representatives from We Listen and Civil Media. Both of these organizations provide educational and discussion-based programming surrounding politics media, and they gave us insight on garnering our audience. Next, we conducted consumer interviews to gain a better understanding of the job of consuming news and ways in which we could appeal to the consumer need surrounding political news. We were also able to validate and invalidate assumptions that we had made previously. Next, we constructed a table using the jobs to be done framework, which is basically the theory that any product or service someone is using, they are hiring to do a specific job for them. Through jobs to be done, it really helped us hone in on the ways that people currently measure success when consuming news and how we could have the greatest impact on consumers of political news with our current capabilities. Next, we conducted a team retreat, allowing us to pause and reflect on our research and team dynamics, enabling us to move forward and more clearly define our problem.
Now, moving on to the problem itself. To have a productive political system, citizens must understand how politics, news, and technology exert influence on their beliefs and target their biases to do so. The spread of misinformation in online media platforms limits the ability to engage in constructive political discourse and has led to unrest and violence in our country. Specifically, we have encountered many distressing events in recent years which have directly correlated to the rampant spread of misinformation on social media. Figuring out how to solve this issue was complex, as it required us to confront our own biases in the way that we perceive news in an effort to figure out how we could best help others. From this, we were able to discern that people who want to be more informed don't know what to trust and not trust, and this can often lead to a disregard for other people's perspective, as one can become inundated in their own belief. Moving on to the solution. Our solution went through a long iterative process that included meeting with several different stakeholders and viewing our project through different frameworks. Additionally, we used the BLI habit of starting small by having team retreats to refocus and narrow the scope of our idea. Ultimately, we concluded that a newsletter would be the best way to display the information that we wanted to convey in a meaningful manner. This format allowed for our readers to have the opportunity to read our newsletter in 3 to 5 minutes and understand important topics going on while also being exposed to both sides of every issue. The different parts of our newsletter were meant to highlight the inadequacies of mainstream journalism and give readers an opportunity to confront their own bias and continually assess where to move from this point.
So let's take a look at our progress along our journey to provide such a solution to this target audience. Currently, we are releasing our newsletter bi-weekly and have accumulated just over 60 subscribers. Following our BLI habit of collect, combine, and create, we've collected and combined our research findings to create new tools that deliver useful and constructive political content. We attempt to tackle an important issue in the news from each 2-week period to provide clarity and nuance that may be lacking in traditional news sources, and supplement the rest of the newsletter with smaller modules that provide tips, tricks, resources, and more to our readers. We highlight headlines that are misleading and clarify what the importance of the issue or article actually is, and cover trending topics across news and social media. This format provides a solution to one of our original research dilemmas of providing concise content to users across the spectrum of political knowledge, while still digging deeper into core issues. In terms of our workflow platforms, we have started our project communicating solely through iMessage, which made it difficult to continuously assign and update team members on project tasks. We've since moved to Slack for more intentional and organized communication across all facets of the project, from writing to social media and outreach. Similarly, we originally used the Google suite of services like Calendar and Excel to schedule meetings, tasks, and newsletter releases. We have recently moved to Trello, a task management software that will help us more clearly define goals and fit Nonpolar into our college schedules. Finally, finding the right balance of newsletter creation and distribution was difficult between the many services that are available online. We've landed on the marriage of Stripo to compile the newsletter and MailChimp in order to distribute the newsletter to our readers.
Next, I will talk about our outreach that we conducted during our fall period. During this outreach, we primarily called upon the BLI habit of engage the world. We reached out to the following orgs: We Listen, College Democrats, and the Michigan Daily. During our outreach, however, we ran into two main problems. First, our lack of notoriety within the Ann Arbor community and smaller campus environment. And secondly, the conflict of interest between these orgs and their ability to collaborate with us. In order to mitigate these issues, we decided to shift outreach to focus more on bringing people into our project through social media. To expand upon our work of social media, during the fall period of our project, we established and maintained social media accounts on both Instagram and Twitter. We have published 6 posts on Instagram and 4 posts on Twitter, which primarily served as publicity for our newsletter. We also released an informational video and accompanying graphic on both platforms. Additionally, we conducted a merchandise giveaway through Instagram, which has garnered 16 comments. Over time, we've accumulated a combined 46 followers across both platforms. In the future, we plan to diversify our types of social media posts by particularly beginning to incorporate aspects of our newsletter, such as tips and tricks, into digestible graphic content on a more regular basis. After we release our website, we also plan to link it to our social media accounts and use it as a landing page, which contains a catalog of past posts. Lastly, we decided on the goal of generating a total of 100 combined social media followers by the end of the winter semester.
Looking toward the future, we need a plan for sustainability to carry on our mission. We set these goals as our highest priorities for the continuation of Nonpolar. To start, we are continuously and relentlessly expanding our audience. We will continue to improve the content and accessibility of our newsletter for our readers. Along with this, we will increase the frequency of the newsletter to a weekly basis for the benefit of our audience. In turn, we need to expand our team to manage the increased workload. We are searching for writers specifically, as the newsletter writing is one of the most time-consuming aspects of the process. Furthermore, we are continuing to pursue partnerships with other organizations to expand our reach and enhance our reputation. In addition, we are continuing to expand our social media presence. We want to increase the frequency of our posts and diversify the content. We plan to utilize our social media for giveaways and further engagement with our audience. The final, but perhaps most important goal for Nonpolar sustainability is to generate revenue. We plan to initially generate revenue via merchandise sales. Additionally, we are assessing opportunities to earn advertising or subscription-based revenue from our newsletter. These goals line the path to a more informed and open-minded world. On a final note, we would like to thank the Barger Leadership Institute, our awesome cohort, Fatima, Sarah, and our wonderful GA Amanda for all of their guidance and help. Thank you to everyone listening for your time and attention.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Amanda, and I have had the privilege of working with Nonpolar over the past year. Thank you for that great presentation and for giving us a detailed summary of your work over the past year. We will now open the space for questions, comments, and discussion. So feel free to vocalize your questions, type them in the chat, and we can get started.
Nonpolar. I just wanted to thank you for a thoughtful presentation. I co-founded We Listen, so it was great to see that contact was made between those two groups. And I I was also a BLI fellow at one point. So thanks to BLI for helping more organizations with a similar focus. I wanted to ask you about who your target reader is. I think that might be helpful to think about as you're expanding your outreach. Is that someone who currently reads political news? Is that someone who does not currently read political news, but is curious to get involved in that way? And also would be happy to connect offline after this if you're interested in chatting more.
Sure, yeah, that would be great. I guess I can tackle this first question. So that was definitely one of our main research questions in terms of targeting an audience, because those two sets, people who are politically knowledgeable and those who aren't, have very different needs. I would say at this point, because it's only a 3 to 5 minute read, it's pretty short content, we are marketing towards people that are looking to learn and gain political knowledge. And that was really something that once we took a step back at our team retreat and looked at what was feasible and what our survey was saying people wanted to learn from their news, that was something we thought we'd be best at. But we certainly do want to provide resources and those smaller things in our newsletter, I think, are more applicable to people who are politically savvy. And I think with a dedicated team of writers in the future, we hope to target that audience more.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe, for your question. I see we have 2 hands raised. We'll go for Adon first, and then we'll have David after.
Great work all. These all look very familiar. So I think I've been a panelist in the past for these, and I can notice that there's been improvement. So really good work, and what an important issue that you are all addressing with nonpolar. Something that kind of reads to me as critical to your work is that a reader would need to know that you are non-biased writers as a team, so that what I'm consuming from the newsletter, I'm relying on that and feel very confident in it. So how do you kind of communicate, to your readers that your work that's published is unbiased without having to keep reorienting people to your newsletter? Like, hey, we're unbiased, we go through this process, and maybe that's what you do. But I was kind of curious about how do you get folks to be really confident in what you're writing?
For sure. So yeah, I definitely think it starts with our values, but when doing our research, we kind of learned that this view from nowhere, unbiased perspective that journalism may say that they take really doesn't exist. We all have our own biases. And I think the most important thing for us to be doing is to recognize our own biases and make sure that the reader understands what our own biases are, what our values are, when they are reading our content, so they are aware even of our biases. I definitely think that the content that we are producing is less biased than what is out there, but I really think that no matter what content someone is creating, it's always going to have bias. And the most important thing for us to do is to recognize that and make sure our readers understand that as well.
Just to add on to that for a second, I just want to say that I think the reason that I think the model works so far, and I think definitely like once we expand a little bit more and create a website, that would be like a core tenet of the website itself. The other thing I think that the reason why I think that is like the bias is understood is because when we present any issue, we try to tackle it from both sides of the aisle and explain it as well as we can from both sides. And a lot of that is doing objective research, just looking into it and trying to find as much information as possible and then synthesizing that information into a way where it's compact and someone who doesn't know anything about the issue can then move forward with that information.
Great, thank you so much.
David, the floor is yours.
Hey, great, thanks. Very much appreciate the presentation, Polar team. Love the use of the values. By the way, I mean, value difference front and center. Curious, revenue as a goal, sustainability, say 3-year plan. How much revenue do you need to keep the business moving ahead when you look out to, call it 2024? Thanks.
So we're still in the process of finding all these calculations. And probably the biggest point right now with us is that we're looking into hiring writers, which we have like budgets set for them, but as we haven't hired any yet, we're not exactly sure how much they'd actually cost. But I think along the lines of $10,000 for a year would be more than enough in revenue for as simple as our project is right now.
Appreciate it. No, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for your questions. For the sake of time, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up the question portion, but I think there are a few comments and questions in the chat. The team can go ahead and take their time in answering those, and we will go ahead and move on to the next team.
Hi, everyone. We are members of the Safer Sanitation Initiative, and we are so grateful for our BLI experience and to be able to present today. So we wanted to start off by giving a quick introduction to our team. We're 3 board members of Project Rishi, which is a nonprofit organization based on college campuses around the US that works in partnership with rural Indian communities to address social disparities and promote sustainable development. All 3 of us got involved because we wanted to use our relative privilege to give back to the communities that our members and our families are from. We're working with the village of Saithar in Tamil Nadu, a state in the southern part of India, and we were connected to Saithar through a member's family friend, Dr. Arjunan, who grew up in this village and returned to it after medical school. He is very passionate about improving living conditions within the village, which is why we're partnering with him and Saithar to address a current lack of toilets for marginalized villagers. Because this was a primary community identified need and Project Rishi takes a need-based approach to working with community partners, we launched the Safer Sanitation Initiative. Open defecation is a major issue in India. Those who practice open defecation are often ostracized from society, which exacerbates pre-existing caste hierarchy. There are also severe health and safety risks, including increased risk of disease, sexual violence, and adverse pregnancy outcomes, such as stillbirths, low birth weight, and preterm births. And these are problems that affect 2,000 to 3,000 people in Saithar. And women have explicitly stated that they feel unsafe using open defecation. And so our mission as Project Rishi is to build sustainable sanitation facilities in Saithar, Tamil Nadu, India, to provide safety and dignity to the women in Saithar. And we did this through 3 phases. The first one is field research, the second one was our implementation phase, and our third one is the evaluation phase.
So starting with the research phase, we had initially conducted a lot of research via journal articles, speaking with mentors both here and in India, and also learning from NGOs. But we wanted to support this research by learning from the community members in Saithar themselves, because again, we are a community-focused organization. And so in our field research phase, we had 3 main questions. First of all, is the community aware of the risks of open defecation and willing to have toilets? Because we didn't want to be imposing something that the community did not want. Second of all, is open defecation impacting the physical and emotional health of the village? Again, just making sure that this is a need in the village. And lastly, how many people do not have reliable access to sanitation facilities, and is this affecting their daily lives? So the first part of this question was more focused on the logistics of what this project would look like, what the scale would be. And again, all 3 of these questions are also confirming what we had heard from our community contact, Dr. Arjunan, but we wanted to make sure that this was a concern that was replicated by multiple villagers. And so we started in May 2021 by reading existing literature to pinpoint specific topics relevant to rural sanitation, like demographics and attitude towards open defecation. And we then formulated questions related to them, as you can see from the picture on the slide, which is a sample of our survey questions. And so in this phase, sustainability was a large guiding principle for us, as we wanted to be well informed about the topics we were working with, and also be able to ask questions relevant to this to ensure long-term maintenance and sustainability of the built facilities, so that what we are building is a long-term project and not something that will fall eventually into disuse and disrepair.
Moving on, between May and June this summer, we recruited volunteers to assist us in translating the interview questions into Tamil, the language spoken in Setur. Here on the screen, you can see some of the translated questions. Simultaneously, we reviewed the interview questions with Dr. Arjunan and our mentors within BLI to ensure that the questions were open-ended and respectful. With the help of Tamil-speaking volunteers, we then asked the translated questions to Setur residents in order to directly communicate with them. We believe that this was crucial in helping us learn firsthand about the experiences of the villagers and their needs and fit in with another guiding principle of ours, which is communication. Through June and August, we conducted interviews with the residents over a WhatsApp video call to learn more about the needs of the village and the specific problems they were facing. The interviewing team consisted of 3 members: the Tamil speaker who was asking the questions, a note taker, as well as someone recording the audio of the interview. Once we had the recordings, we then created transcriptions in English so that the data could be analyzed. Here on the screen, we have an excerpt from an interview transcript. We believe that conducting video interviews and facilitating this conversation with the residents helped us build trust and support for our project, since they were able to learn more about us and also ask any questions that they may have about our role in this project. Moving on, here we have some results from the interviews that we conducted. Through the interviews, we were able to learn more about the effects of open defecation on the daily lives of the residents. While we had conducted research on these topics, hearing firsthand about the negative experiences the residents had due to a lack of toilets confirmed our initial assumptions. They voiced concerns such as exposure to snake bites and poisonous insects in the location of open defecation, as well as infections from walking to areas barefoot and stepping on stool, and the fear of physical or sexual violence for women. In terms of toilet accessibility, we learned about an existing toilet that fell into disuse due to a lack of maintenance by the panchayat, which is the local government, as well as other safety concerns. The residents also said that they were not able to afford toilets due to the high cost of construction. Since our questions were open-ended, we were also able to learn more about other concerns or needs of the villagers apart from toilets. Some of these concerns were focused on education, such as water flooding around schools, making it hard for students to attend school. They also voiced concern in terms of a lack of ceremonial premises for weddings as well as other cultural events. Due to COVID and schools being shut down, the cost of education also rose, and the schools in Setur are only open till 5th grade, which was also another concern.
So our project has also adapted a lot since we began the capstone, and similarly, we faced unexpected challenges. And so talking first about how our project has adapted, from talking with mentors and through our initial boot camp, we actually decided to switch to using long-form interviews rather than our initial plan of quantitative surveys. And this was, as we mentioned before, to develop a better relationship with the community that was more two-sided, and also understand concerns that can't be communicated by simple yes/no answers. So for example, how does open defecation impact a woman's daily routine? That's more of a long-form question. We also learned that bathrooms, although they are more critical for women since they are more likely to face sexual violence risk, is also important for all villagers due to, again, as was mentioned, the physical harm and disease that results from open defecation. And this was a concern brought up by both men and women in the village. And finally, as sustainability of the toilets and the continuity of the water source was the downfall of the past government project, we decided to include the construction of a new water source and use bioseptic toilets, which require almost no maintenance. We also faced some challenges, mainly with communication, both internally within our team as a larger project Rishi, and externally with India, and in deciding what entity in India to transfer the funds to, whether that was an NGO, a single person like Dr. Arjunan, or the local government. And so in making these decisions, we ultimately considered our guiding principles of putting the residents' needs before the government's requests. There was a lack of trust of the government, so we considered that, and prioritizing regular and honest communication with our team and stakeholders. And doing this helped us develop a slower and more realistic timeline that we will apply going forward.
So throughout this whole process, we identified key BLI habits that really proved crucial to the progress of our project. The first habit that we consistently used was to always ask the residents about their lives as a whole and where the context of sanitation fit into their daily lives. We sought to lead with curiosity and care for their lives so that we can learn about the community as deeply as possible. Our next habit was to expect challenges, and we definitely faced time and communication delays when working with a large team across continents. Our last habit was to engage the world. To us, this meant analyzing what had gone well in the past, especially regarding maintenance methods and construction locations of past sanitation facilities. In order to succeed in this project, we needed to read past literature, speak with NGOs, and learn the history of our community.
So talking about what is coming up for us, after the funds have been released, which is the stage we are in right now, construction of the first facility will start. And as you can see from these pictures, our contact, Dr. Arjunan, has already been discussing with women in the village, members of self-help groups, what an ideal location for the toilet construction would be for them. Again, making sure that this is focused on the residents' needs. And following this, we will be taking data on maintenance and usage of the toilets and adapting our implementation plan for the construction of additional facilities. And so thank you all.
Hello again, everyone. I've also had the pleasure of working with Stakeholder Sanitation Initiative. Thank you for that great presentation and for highlighting all of the great work that you've done over the past year. We will now again open the space for question, comments, and discussion. Feel free to vocalize your questions or type them in the chat. So I always have this question around community engagement. So maybe if the members of the, we have a question from Danielle. Danielle, feel free to share your question.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle. Pronouns are she and her. I work at the Ginsberg Center, so love doing and talking about community engagement projects. So I was glad to see this. I know that you talked about using kind of a needs-focused approach. And so I would love to hear you talk about the relationship building, which we know is also really important for community engaged projects, and how you thought about things like power relationships, knowing that you were coming in with funding. And so would love to just hear you process through how you made some decisions and cultivated relationships with a power conscious approach.
Yeah, I think with the thing of coming in with funding, that was something that we were really conscious of, especially because there is a tendency that when people come in and they have funding, they're like, well, I have the funding, so you should be able to bend to what I need. And so I guess what we really tried to do with that is, first of all, when we were talking with the residents in our interviews, we weren't mentioning like we have X amount of funds. We were just saying like we want to get to know the community better. What do you feel needs to be improved? And just like pretty much having a talk with them. And then I think that really helped us, like having that foundation. Also having someone who trusted us and who we trust in the community was really helpful in terms of allowing us to build relationships with other people in the community as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that. Initially, our idea that we had in the really early stages of this project was to let our presence kind of be known like to the residents by like sending them like some like sanitation kits or something. And we decided not to do that plan just because we didn't want to buy things from here and like send that over and kind of in a different way kind of showcase that funding. So that's why we decided to go with just the long form interviews where we can like speak with the residents. And we also took the time to like recruit some Tamil speaking volunteers who can communicate with them on their language, which is also really important to build that trust. And so with those things like in tandem, I think that's how we were aiming to do that.
Thank you, Sanjana and Kavya. I see that we have two hands, so we'll go ahead with Ram and then David.
Thank you. Great presentation. It's also very personal because I do research in this area. It's also my state where you've done this work, so it is important. I'm very happy for you to learn about the culture, and with a lot of humility, you learn a lot of things about what's happening in the village. I appreciate that. My question is, can you talk a little bit about how Rishi interacted with, you also interact with the Rishi, which is an organization. So there are multiple organizations you are sub-coordinated in implementing the project. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you negotiate these different organizations and trying to understand how to make them work towards the goal you have. That'll be a useful information.
I think in regards to Rishi as a whole, they were very hands-off, honestly. We did have a lot of support from other Rishi chapters and just talking to them about their projects. Like some people have done sanitation projects, some people haven't, but like they've worked in a similar area, has helped us a lot, especially in the initial stages. In terms of working towards a common goal, that was actually something with BLI and our stakeholders in the village that had to be like very open communication, because we did have a lot of like research requirements before the funding could be sent. And on their side, that can seem like frustrating in that there are so many delays and we've already told you there are these problems. And so for us, I think what helped was just putting like forward a list of like, this is what needs to happen, and having that right off the bat, rather than it kind of it seeming like we're adding stuff, so that they know ahead of time, like this is what needs to happen before they can release the funds, and having that set expectation.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thank you, Sanjana. So in the interest of time, we'll also just close out with David's question.
Thanks. I'll be brief, and likewise really enjoyed the presentation. Talk about engaging the world. And I'm just curious, did the team, I want to applaud the technique of open-ended questions. Was that intentional? Because the ability to come across flooding issues or ceremonial settings, the adjacencies, you pull the thread, it's a great technique. Just curious if it was intentional or not, or if you just landed upon it. And again, thank you.
That actually came out of our BLI bootcamp experience earlier this summer, because we came in with the idea of doing just like surveys of like yes and no questions. And we heard from the Ginsberg Center and just like talking across like teams in BLI, and our advisors, like everyone was so helpful. But we got the feedback to talk to them really openly, so we can hear about just like their lives as a whole and how sanitation fits into their lives as a whole. And that was really helpful because also they were able to speak to us about like health problems in their family, or like the ceremonial facilities that they don't have in their community, which also kind of goes back to Danielle's question about like building trust, because they were able to share those different parts of their lives with us with those questions. So yeah, so that was really helpful to us, like to generate those transcripts too. And we definitely went back and listened to it.
Yeah, that's super. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, David, and thank you, SSI, for your great presentation. So every year, one team is selected to work with the London Idea Project, where they receive specialized support and mentorship. The London Idea Project was created to celebrate the legacy of Adam London, a 2011 graduate of the university. He was an innovator, a passionate creator, and an avid explorer. In 2017, the London Idea and BLI began their partnership to fund, mentor, and develop a London Idea project to continue Adam's work connecting people and ideas. And as in previous years, they have provided valuable mentorship and guidance to this year's London Idea Capstone team, General Intelligences.
Okay, hi everyone. So we're General Intelligences. Next slide, please. And so I'm Magda. I'm a senior at the university studying neuroscience in the honors program, and I will pass it along to Nav.
Hi everyone, I'm Nav. I'm a core team member, and I'm also a senior here at UMich studying biology, health, and society. And Ina, take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Ina. I'm also a core team member studying computer science. I'm in my third year working on the project alongside Magda and Nav.
Cool. Next slide, thank you. So starting off, let's talk a little bit about COVID-19 and education. So, as many of us know, school without school has been traumatic for a lot of people. It's been makeshift, it's been messy. Parents, teachers, and students have been fumbling with technology, fumbled even more with expectations. And when things go wrong as they have been in the past few months, we can also see what's in front of us with new clarity. And that includes the gaps, the inequities, and the failures of our education system. They're all heightened. And whether that's the students who don't have Wi-Fi at home to complete their homework, or the student that was relying on in-person networking events to get their foot in the door, is that what we consider common sense even is what we consider common sense even irrevocably common?
So education inequity is a complex problem and one that we're striving to fix through our programming. There are so many factors that contribute to it, like a lack of equity in experiences, lack of mentors and mentorship, systemic factors, cultural barriers, and COVID-19 is yet another contributing factor to these inequities. According to the CNBC, 80% of jobs are filled through networking and personal connections. And broadly speaking, these inequities lead underrepresented and marginalized students to have reduced college retention rates, lower acceptance rates for graduate programs, and lower salaries for first-generation graduates.
Simply put, we recognize that there are a lot of inequities in higher education and academia. There are some great programs that support students in the process of applying to and getting accepted into college, yet the safety net is cut from under students once they arrive on campus. Certainly, there is programming at some schools that attempt to remediate this. However, many schools would much rather allocate their resources to recruiting new students and building new centers for equity than truly supporting their students. Our organization is not only functioning on a national scale, but also on an international one, where we have reached students in over 76 countries. UMich is a large school, which means that we are in an interesting position. And here there are programs like CSP and a mentorship program through ONSP. However, even though we have those programs, there's a great potential that students fall behind and are not supported. The mental and emotional adjustments to college are not adequately considered, and for many people, it can feel like you are entirely alone and the only person that is not getting it. But in reality, a lot of this is common sense because common sense, like going to office hours, advocating for yourself, and asking for help, are not actually common known to many students.
All right, so as someone who had to navigate the educational and professional landscape of the US education system, I can attest that some of these things are not really common sense. As a pre-med student, I plan to obviously apply to med school. And when I read stats, like 50% of students from medical school are from the highest income quartile in the US, whereas less than 5% come from the lowest income quartile, I think it tells me that we're failing to provide equity. When I see people with outstanding potential drop out of school because they need to support their families, I'm frustrated. And when I see that it costs thousands of dollars and months of time and waiting to publish a single paper, and I am just simply astonished. When I hear a fellow peer brag about never going to his research lab and getting his name on a publication because his PI or principal investigator is his parent's friend, I'm reminded of why this is still an issue. So I started this organization, General Intelligences, in April of 2020 because I wanted to support and empower students, but also because I wanted to make sure that common sense was more common as it relates to this educational model.
So some of the challenges that we faced are related to funding, time management, and recalibrating. For funding, we needed some starting capital in order to scale the organization. Mostly this was focused on marketing and formalizing the brand of the organization. And for time management, we are all full-time students, so we had to put forth an effort to prioritize the project when it needed to be worked on. And recalibrating, there are a few times that we needed to shift strategies and course correct. We made sure to implement and consider feedback we received from our larger team of 40 individuals, as well as from the students taking the program.
So we conducted several surveys over the course of the capstone program and an in-depth literature review as well. We worked on expanding existing components that were working well and getting rid of components that were time-consuming and ultimately not that beneficial. For example, we decided to get rid of our e-magazine and basically replace that with just having articles on our own website. As it's communicating the same information, and the compiling of the e-magazine process, or just compiling the e-magazine in general, was a lengthy process, and our resources were better allocated elsewhere. So we did retain our Mentorship Capstone program, where 3 to 5 students learn about a topic with weekly educational materials, and then they work on their own project throughout the course and explore the topic further. The goal and hope is that the students are able to benefit from a guided research and mentorship experience together, while also bringing that information to their own communities and working on developing their own projects. And then from our research, both in the literature and from our surveys, we found some promising statistics. From our own programming, 97% of students had indicated to us that they gained crucial skills, and 73% of students, after tracking throughout the program, returned for more than 3 workshops. So those are promising figures.
So at this point, we've helped over 15,000 students, reaching our goal of helping that amount by December. We define help as having interacted with our website in some way, such as the articles, or the overall programming, such as attending workshops and webinars.
We have several next steps, and so these are just our 5 next steps. So 1, work on our research journal. We have our e-board and are ready to launch. We will be doing our first call for papers in December. 2, team recruitment. We are looking for semester-long interns for general intelligences, and we typically have about 7 to 10 that we accept from the applicants. 3, a sustainability plan. We are working on seeing how we can stay sustainable in the long term. 4, campus ambassadors. We currently have about 20 campus ambassadors on campuses, and we'll be working to have more ambassadors at smaller schools and community colleges. And 5, community programming. We recognize the potential of talking about this problem more openly from a student perspective, and we hope to connect more with different communities.
And with that, thank you so much for listening. If you want to keep up with us and what we're doing with our project, please do follow us on our different social media accounts. The handle is @generalintelligences for all of them. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And of course, our main website is generalintelligences.org. Thank you, and thank you for helping us make common sense more common.
Amazing presentation, General Intelligences. Thank you so much for sharing that. The engaging narrative arc that's rooted in such a common thread that we're all sharing right now in education made that presentation especially engaging and easy to follow with the context. And I think we all really appreciate that. So we'd like to open up the floor for questions, comments, or feedback. And you can either use the chat or raise your hand or whatever you feel is the most engaging situation for you. Thanks again for that presentation. Yes, of course, go ahead, David.
Hey, great, thanks. And again, really appreciate the presentation. It's interesting. Where I'm going with is, the challenges, funding, time management, and then course correcting. And I want to applaud all the teams from the standpoint of time management, because it's so easy to say, hey, listen, this is what I'm going to do over my 4 years on campus. And time is so precious. And how do you allocate time? Because we all have a day job, and then there's these additional opportunities that we have. So just applause along those lines. And question again is tied into funding in terms of founded in April 2020, start small, then what you think you might need, say next year in terms of funding, to continue the momentum. I'm just curious on that. And again, let me just close the London idea, Adam and Ellen, who I think is online, just really applaud that partnership as well. But curious in terms of funding, again, to keep the business, keep the idea moving forward.
Great question. Thank you so much for your kind words as well. So I can take that question if everyone else is okay with that from my team. So in terms of overhead costs, we're actually in a slightly unique position in that actually we were sustaining ourselves before the capstone program with no funding at all for that entire year. The funding, of course, has been very beneficial to us in terms of creating some ways that we could scale the organization, but it was by no means a prerequisite for the organization to be successful. And I really do believe that because we've managed to front some of those costs over the duration of the program, those are not going to be costs that are recurring. And so in essence, I really do think that our overhead costs are going to be practically zero.
Gotcha. No, very good. Thank you. Appreciate the color.
We can invite a question from Ram and move on to one from Tiffany after that. Thanks for that question, David.
Great presentation. It's also personally important to me because I'm a first generation college graduate. I wish I had an access to a website like your website when I was in undergrad. It would have made a huge difference in my life. So I think it's also important, specifically targeting first gen and marginalized communities. Reaching community college will be very important. So I think you can define a little more, how your audience, audience is going to be. So great project, great work.
I echo that sentiment as well. And I'm noticing in the chat, there are several folks who are agreeing that illuminating the hidden curriculum is something that many of us can benefit from. So thanks for that comment. Tiffany, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation and for the careful thought you put into how to approach the challenge. It's a very large societal issue with the hidden curriculum and making education more equitable across all levels. And you guys have done a great job. I'm wondering, I'm super impressed with the outcomes that you reached, which is 15,000 students. That's amazing. And was wondering if you guys could talk to what you attribute to your success. Like, what were the pivotal points that really made the $15,000 goal accomplishable? Because it's just remarkable that you were able to, have an impact on that many students in such a short amount of time.
Thank you so much. So I think there are actually quite a few factors that we could attribute to that. First of all, of course, our team was amazing and very passionate and dedicated. You see some of us here, but there are so many more that are on our team from different schools, both in the US and abroad, that have worked tirelessly to make sure that this happens and that we are hitting our goals all the time. I guess I would say the two main things would be setting those goals and really trying to make tangible plans for how to achieve them have been like the biggest part of it, I would say, because I think a lot of times we think of these really large goals and then it can kind of get overwhelming to like figure out how exactly to get to those goals. So I think something that we've done really well is creating like this is a smaller step that we can take in the interim period to get to that bigger goal. And I think that we've done a very good job with that. And then, of course, I would say the second major thing is that we really harnessed the power of social media. So obviously for people our age, there has really not been a time where social media was not such a prevalent part of our lives. And because the demographic that we're targeting are students that are between the ages of 17 to 26 as our primary demographic, it only made logical sense to use social media, which people are using pretty much every day, to bring that information directly to them. And so I would attribute it to those two things.
Yeah, thank you very much. Wonderful reflections.
I will also add on to that as your GA, a lot of grit and panache and passion goes a very long way to make those goals accomplishable as well. And a question from Fatima as well.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about your campus ambassador program and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the concept of a campus ambassador sort of was something that a lot of brands have been using for kind of expanding their brand reputation on different college campuses for students specifically. So I actually know a few people that are campus ambassadors for other brands. And so that's kind of where like the idea came to fruition. It kind of seemed like a good way for us to get the word out to people that are on different college campuses that we don't currently have like direct access to because we may not have the contacts there yet. So in terms of campus ambassadors, I mean, we have them at 20 different schools right now. A lot of them are larger public and private institutions. We have a few of the Ivy League schools on there as well represented. But something that would be, like we mentioned, a very strong personal goal and team goal would be to really expand the reach of that program and have it be at places that need it much more because they do have less resources like community colleges and kind of smaller schools where they might not already have that kind of funding present. That would be like the next step. But basically what they do on their campus is they spread the word about all of our different offerings each month, basically. That could include going to different clubs, like first gen orgs and stuff like that on their campuses, and basically talking about us as a resource, you know, putting flyers up, sending messages in group chats, all of that kind of stuff. And so it's not necessarily very labor intensive as a process, but it's very crucial.
Great, thank you for that information, Magda, and from all of General Intelligences as well. It's been a pleasure working alongside and with you and learning, and looking forward to seeing how you reach more students and support them as we move forward. And with all the teams as well, thank you for sharing these amazing projects. In the interest of time, I'll turn it back over to Fatima and for our concluding statements.
I'm actually going to hand it off to Ram for our gratitudes and final thoughts. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much, everyone, and especially, the whole team, starting with Fatima, Sarah, and Amanda, and Hannah, Elizabeth, Roar, and Beth, and of course, Mary, pulling all these things together during COVID. It's just one of the most challenging time. And when we were looking at the proposals, I know all the steps each team took from the original proposal, what I read, where they moved, and the movement in their thinking, in the research, in the product they delivered. It's quite amazing journey. I think the most of the time people talk about the project, I think the journey is the story. I hope each one of you in your team develop a narrative about how you actually did the story, not the finding, all your learning. And humility, you talked about humility in all your posters, and that it'll be good to really bring how it changed your perception as you were learning, working through the process. So it's quite an amazing set of ideas, and stay with that marathon of a year-long project, doing this and pulling through this. So I want to thank all the staff and the people and the London family, Ellen is here, I think, for the support all along and for helping our students to really apply what we teach. So it's not very bookish thing we do. Actually, they actually go and do things and make a difference. And wherever they are going to be, I think BLI will be part of them. And I think the project is the signature we leave with them. Hope they carry it in a way with them and share it with the others and inspire us as well as other people in what they do. I also want to thank David for all his support and being here for all the time, for making everything happen. And great project. And it's in a very high note, we can actually end the semester considering all the constraints we have. I know people would have gone to the field, done some amazing work, but with all the constraints you've done, most of the things what you want to do, and you focus on your learning experience, which is the most important part. Not you may fail, which is okay, which we talked about failure, which is very important. I think learn to talk about the failures and the lessons you learned from the project. I think that's the most compelling story of your leadership growth and development. Hope all the lessons you learned, we learned from you, will stay with us and with you. And thank you for everything you did. thanks for everybody being here, and Tiffany and other people visiting us today, and other people who joined us after a long time. And hope we continue to have the conversation. Please contact them. Please email me whenever you need anything. Let me know. Not that it's the end of our relationship in that sense. So feel free to email me. Next steps, what do you do? I'm pretty sure all the projects have a universal appeal in many ways. For example, the sustainability issue, inequality in education is growing in all over the world. Everybody will be interested in a project like this. So you have a very, very fascinating way. Each project has very global and a universal angle to the story, which you haven't explored it for a number of reasons. It's too much to do right at this point, but your story will be appealing to all over the world. Different culture will relate to your story in a very interesting way. What can we do about it? So great job. Thank you. Thanks for doing all the work, and thanks to all my staff, especially Fatima, for pulling these things. It's an amazing job, and let's give a big hand to everybody for getting this through this program during a very difficult time. Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.